Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys enjoyed that first segment. I enjoyed really breaking down who could be the next big thing at respective positions. And we definitely have another exciting fantasy football segment for you guys as I answer some burning fantasy football questions. But before we get into that, I do want to remind you yet again that if you do feel so inclined to consider leaving a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud, it is hugely appreciated by all at the network, especially me and my fellow podcasters. Also, if you have any burning questions, comments, or concerns, you can leave them there as well, and they will be answered and addressed at the beginning of the next episode. But without further ado, let's jump right into the second segment of today's show, and it is some of the burning fantasy football questions some of you might have. Are you a little bit anxious going into this fantasy draft? And the answer to that question could be yes, because, like I said before, it is such a volatile market right now where you might be considering overvaluing certain position groups, even certain teams you might be considering overvaluing just due to their depth, their experience, no matter what. And I'm willing to present to you new cases to some of these questions, because I want to dispel some notions that you guys might have that could prevent you from taking huge risks that might not help you down the road in terms of fantasy. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. And let's start off with a very important question, because, like I said before in the previous segment, this market, while right now is not the most pivotal, it certainly will be a couple years down the road. And you definitely want to start considering this question in the back of your mind over the next couple of years to really help you understand this market. And that is, which backfields, which team's backfield specifically, should you be looking at? And right now, there are a lot of high-end running backs right now. You look at the McCaffreys of the world. You look at the Saquons who just made a big money move of the world. And you say, those are the guys who I'm going to have at the top end of my board. But I'm willing to say that there's going to be more value. I'm looking at teams that are currently slept on, like the Steelers. A lot of people say that their depth really is kind of iffy because Najee Harris has kind of had a down year, and Jaylen Warren, he had spurts of brilliance but hasn't really sustained it thus far. But I'm really looking out for that team. And then the Falcons, obviously, with Arthur Smith gone, how will Bijan Robinson be more implemented into this offense? Will Tyler Algier get more of that bell cow role, kind of that guy who gets you that 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of feel to it? And then a team like the Denver Broncos, I feel like Javonte Williams is highly undervalued in terms of fantasy. And don't sleep on Jaleel McLaughlin either. He's a very explosive guy in the open field. Should get a lot of yards after carry. And I'm really looking forward to how some of these teams, specifically when you're looking at their skill position groups, should be evaluated. I think it's very helpful to maybe go through some teams that have some underrated players, undervalued players, and get a list of about 4 or 5 guys, especially in markets that you know will immediately have like these short bursts of runs in different draft rounds, and make a kind of a safe list of guys that you can look at and be like, okay, this guy can definitely be here, but another guy from this team could also be there as well. So you want to have options. So don't throw all your eggs into one basket. Don't go down swinging, missing on a big guy like a McCaffrey or Barkley, because you're definitely going to find value later in rounds, especially at the running back market. For now, I'm warning you, the running back market is going to get very hectic in years to come. But when I look at these young running back rooms, I definitely see different ways you can take advantage of what each has to offer. Now, another position group and another kind of question that a lot of people will ask, especially because of how deep these draft classes have been getting, is which rookie wide receivers to value. Especially in a draft class that, while definitely not the best in terms of like top-end talent, let's say, it certainly is a very deep class. And I feel like a lot of players will highly covet guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, maybe even a guy like Brian Thomas, as they're going into like these very weird groups where they'll be highly seen as at least the number 1 or 2 wide receivers on that team. They immediately shore up areas of concern for their respective teams. But looking at the latter stages of the first round and the early stages of the second round in terms of the draft, there are some second-tier guys here who really are intriguing. For example, I really think a lot of people are sleeping on a guy like Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey goes immediately into an LA Chargers room that does not have a designated number 1 wide receiver just yet. They lost a lot of depth. They lost Keenan Allen. They don't really have a guy that pops in immediately. Josh Palmer, maybe. Jalen Guyton, I think he's gone. So now Ladd McConkey comes in, and while he's certainly not a guy who is going to extend the field vertically and might not be as polished of a route runner as other players in this draft, I do believe that he immediately makes things a little bit easier for Justin Herbert, because I feel like Jim Harbaugh wants to simplify that offense, get Justin Herbert to throw the ball more quickly, and Ladd McConkey is that kind of player. He has good hands, he has decent speed, and he can make things happen. And then I look at a guy like Keon Coleman, who's in a similar situation where he also has an excellent quarterback, but they have questions at the wide receiver position. They don't have a cemented number 1. They have a mixture of role players like Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel outside of Keon Coleman. And I love Keon Coleman because his catch radius is brilliant. Josh Allen, his big thing is that he wants to limit turnovers. And I think Keon Coleman does a great job of that, because Josh Allen can just put it up knowing that Keon Coleman's catch radius has a great chance to allow him to make a lot of contested catches. And that's what I believe the Buffalo Bills offense is going to be predicated on. Yes, they want to simplify it a little bit. We saw it last year when they used more screen game. But I really think that Keon Coleman should not be underestimated in terms of his prowess as a receiver, especially in the department of hands and catches if you are in a PPR league as well. And then lastly, I look at Xavier Worthy. Huge fan of him, huge University of Texas fan, so I watched a lot of what he did for that team. Just adds speed and verticality to a Kansas City Chiefs offense who has Patrick Mahomes, who knows what it's like to have a guy like that. He had him in Tyreek Hill for many years. Now Xavier Worthy comes in potentially as a solid replacement for this squad, and immediately varies this offense, allows Andy Reid to get more creative in terms of play calling in the open field, doesn't limit them as much. And so Xavier Worthy, I feel like, should be going, say, at least late second round, early third round in terms of fantasy drafts, because he could be a star for the Kansas City Chiefs. But then let's transition from the other quote-unquote receivers, like they did in the receiver when they included George Kittle at the tight end position. Let's talk about the tight ends. You're probably sick to death of me talking about tight ends, but it's the group right now that a lot of people are focusing on because of the fact it's just getting deeper and deeper. You're not just looking at Kelsey, George Kittle, Andrews, and those guys on this Mount Rushmore of tight ends. You're looking at guys like Laporta, McBride, these young guys who really are on the precipice of creating this narrative around these young tight ends that cement the reputation as guys who can truly take over, because you need depth when you are in fantasy drafts. You don't want to be going, oh, woe is me if you miss out on top level talents. You want a guy who you know is going to be like, okay, I'm going to get there. So, that being said, the question still remains, which path do you take? Laporta or Kelsey? Which generation do you trust more? And right now, I'm actually going to tell you, I'm going to stick with Kelsey. I'm going to stick with the Kelsey generation. Because A, they're still in the league. B, they make deep runs. And C, they have quarterbacks who can get them the football and are in systems that predicate themselves on tight ends being just as active as wide receivers. You look at Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. Last season, yes, his production was down, but he still was one of the go-to target for the Kansas City Chiefs. You look at Lamar Jackson. Yes, he's getting better wide receivers, but Mark Andrews remains his top target until he gets injured. A lot of injury concerns around him, but that was in the playoffs, and he's a fantastic regular season tight end. Then you look at a guy like George Kittle. We've seen a lot of it if you've seen receiver. He gets a lot of attention from the San Francisco 49ers offense as well. When I look at the tight end position right now, do I really believe that Sam Laporta is going to sustain tight end 1 status, especially when it was not one of the best tight end 1 seasons by a fantasy tight end? No. I think that there are going to be better options down the line. And Sam Laporta is in an offense that really is starting to come into its own. And I don't necessarily think he's going to be the focal point for much longer. Yes, he's still important, but you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown on that offense. You have Jahmyr Gibbs. You have a solid backfield depth. And so Sam Laporta, I feel like, might regress a little bit. And so that's why I'm sticking with Kelce, at least for 1 or 2 more years. And then the last question, I'll be very brief here. Don't jump for a QB. Especially now that there's a huge crop of good, solid rookie quarterback, the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, maybe Drake May. Don't jump for one. When to make your move, make it in the 5th or 6th round. You don't need me to tell you that because obviously you wait for your QBs. But you can wait a little bit longer, I feel like, this year. Because you don't have to panic. You know who's going to go early. And you know that there's depth of the position either way. So don't panic about the QB position. It's a volatile market. It's going to change. But as of now, you can still wait a little bit to pounce on your QB of choice. But that's just about do it for this segment. Coming next, we go to the fantasy rushing conundrum. Which 5 teams should be looking at in terms of who can contribute to your fantasy team's rushing production success? You don't want to miss this segment. We'll be right back.